Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to the League One podcast EFL debate. We're talking about teams who could plummet into the dogfight and possibly the relegation zone in the third tier this evening. And I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Jack Ward, from the Jack Ward Football Podcast and the League One podcast and TLOP as it's known. Jack, thanks so much for joining us. Before we bring in Jack from Shrews Analysis, I wanted to get your thoughts just briefly on the sort of state of play in the relegation dogfight in League One.
Yeah, the question that we just spoke about on TLOP actually was the big question, I'm sure the one that we'll go into detail on, is where do you call it, really? Who is in that conversation? For me personally, based on current form, which is very dangerous, I think it could be 5 teams for 4 places. Look, let's see what happens with Burton. I think we're going to find. I think Cambridge under Neil Harris are going to be okay. So maybe it's 6 teams, 4 places. I remember we had this chat. I think, and this is crazy. We had this conversation, and you made us rank the teams that could go down. The worst game ever invented.
And I'll do it again.
We had Northampton in that chat. They're now 9th in League One. Which I think is incredible. So that just shows how things can change really quickly. Let's wait and see. But I think it's going to be really tight. 4 is brutal to go down in League One, isn't it? And I don't think there's loads of teams for me that will get dragged into it or could go down. I think it's going to be really tight. And I'm glad I'm not, or hopefully, unless something goes drastically wrong, I'm glad that we're not part of it.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one because it did look a few weeks ago like there were loads of teams sort of hovering precariously above the relegation zone. But you look at it at the moment and you see Burton, they've turned things around a little bit under Gary Mills as caretaker. Neil Harris has had the bounce at Cambridge. Wigan, I don't think, are going to go down. Wycombe Wanderers, they've only actually lost one of their last 5 now, and they got a crucial win last time out. Vale have got a couple of wins lately. And then you're looking at a side like Shrewsbury, who, I think are one of the worst teams in the league. Not necessarily worse, but certainly towards the bottom. But they've got a 7-point cushion. So
find ways to win against sides they need to beat, which I think is a really important trait they're building. So it's tough. It's tough.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about Shrewsbury now because we're joined by Jack from Shrews Analysis. Good evening, Jack. Thanks for talking to us.
Hi, guys.
It seems to be very much one of those situations where, if you're looking at Shrewsbury Town from the outside, you're saying, gosh, you're mid-table in League One, you should be fine. You're doing great relative to, the sort of, oh my goodness, it's just dropped out there, relative to where the club's been historically. But actually, it's maybe in terms of on the pitch, there's been no sort of real signs in terms of performances just yet.
Yeah, it's been a bit of an. Obviously, I know we've spoken a couple of times this season about it. It's been a strange season, as I heard you guys mention a minute ago about us being 13th. It's a bit of a miracle the fact we sit there. To be fair, obviously we've scored 17 goals, I think, which is just second lowest in the league. Conceded 36. Again, I'm not sure where that ranks, but it was certainly down near the bottom. But we've somehow got 30 points and sit 7 points clear. So. Yeah, it's been a bit strange. I just heard Jack allude to the fact that we managed to win games, which it's not a bad trait, to be able to dig out those wins when needed. But it's been by no means convincing. That's for sure.
Yeah, go on, Jack.
Yeah, no, I think it's really true. I sort of gave Shrewsbury a bit of a hard time recently, sort of saying that in terms of their long-term plan and their vision and what they're trying to do, it's not quite clear. But they're sort of getting away with it because they're beating teams they need to beat. Against Fleetwood, I mean, they needed to win that game. Fleetwood are struggling, and they found a way to do it. They scored 3 goals, and they've struggled for goals this season. That's the game to start scoring 3 goals in. In terms of what Shrewsbury are going to be and what we could potentially see them as a League One outfit and beyond, I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure Shrewsbury know, but ultimately, sort of security is important, and I think because of that trait, that security is actually okay, to be honest.
Yeah, again, in my opinion, our first goal every season is to get that magic 50 points mark. I know that 50 points has been, teams haven't needed that in the past few years, but that's still the figure. The first aim is survival without a shadow of a doubt. Again, probably the short-term dream is that we don't have the seasons fretting, looking over our shoulders. Last season was an example of that. ignoring all kind of the off-field stuff, we had a comfortable season, and we were probably safe from the end of January onwards, really, which is the first time that certainly happened. So that's the aim for the club in the short term, I'd say, is to not be involved in a dogfight every season. Obviously, long term, we'd love to push on and become more competitive. Obviously, budget plays a large part in that. So without any investment, I don't think that'll be happening anytime soon. Although investment is something that's rumours are floating about of the chairman looking to potentially sell. So if new ownership does come in, that might be something that kind of kicks us on from there. But yeah,
Actually,
it's
Jack,
one of them.
could we just touch on that, because that seems like quite an important issue to me, because I'm sure I remember at the back end of the 21-22 season there was murmurings that the owner Roland Whiteley would be open to selling, but it would be an internal sort of takeover. There would be quite a smooth thing without an awful lot of disruption. I think the name at the time was Paul Delves, who's already been on the board, I believe. Is it a similar situation this time around, or is it more of an external consortium?
No, it would be external now. You mentioned Paul Delves there, and again, if rumours are to be believed, he was kind of brought in to be Wycherley's successor. By all accounts, they had a bit of a falling out, and Delves is no longer part of the club, I believe. So it would be something external. I think the chairman is quite selective with who he's willing to sell to, which it's not the worst thing in the world, because we've all seen what happens to clubs if they are given over to the wrong hands. But it would be an external investment. There's no one internally that would be in a position to take over the club.
Do we have any sort of an idea of what that might look like, or have there been any names that have been mooted, or are we sort of a bit in the dark at the moment?
No names for definite. There's been a couple of consortiums that again have been rumoured. One was a Swedish consortium, which was mentioned a couple of months ago, but that seems to have gone a bit cool now. Right. There's another consortium which I believe is interested as well. I don't know a huge amount of detail about them, but I believe it's a group of people rather than just one businessman or businesswoman that's looking to take over the club. Again, nothing's really come out about that. In terms of nothing concrete, at least anyway. It has been confirmed that he's looking to sell, but in terms of to whom exactly, as I mentioned, other than the fact there was the Scandinavian consortium which was mentioned, again from what I'm hearing, I don't believe that'll be the case. So it seems as if it is going to be sold anytime soon, it'll be to this other consortium that's kind of that's showing interest at the minute. Again, nothing imminent, I believe, is going to be happening with that, but it does look to be, from what I understand, that just that one party, if we are going to sell it, will be to them.
Well, it'd be nice to have for the club to have a little bit of clarity, certainly in terms of detail on what the consortiums are, what some of their beliefs are, and what that would all look like, and hopefully those details are going to come to the surface, in due course. In terms of on the field and what's required, I suppose, in January, Jack, to make sure that you do tick off those 50 points. What do you think this squad needs at the moment, bearing in mind the injuries that you've struggled with this season?
I think I put a bit of a thread out on Twitter, or X, sorry, should I say, the other day, about where I kind of see the club at the moment. One swallow doesn't make a summer, admittedly, but the win over Fleetwood was badly needed. We were in a pretty bad place before that. Again, it's not by no means solved everything, but it was important just to calm things down slightly. And within that, I did put a list of I have put a list of players out since of who I'd like us to sign, but more positions is kind of clearer to see. Obviously, you never know what targets they're looking at. Again, you mentioned injuries. We've had 6 loanees this year, and 4 have been long-term injured, which for clubs like ourselves, we kind of rely on having those 5 loans to supplement the squad every year. So the fact that we've not had that has meant we have struggled. I think we need one wing back on either side, and this is provided. So Elliot Thorpe's gone back to Leyton already. We've got 3 other players, Kieran Phillips from Huddersfield, Ryan Finnegan from Southampton, and Brandon Fleming from Hull, who are also injured. So providing that those 3 all go back, which I believe they will, I'd say we need a wing back on either side, at least 1 central midfielder, probably 2 being a bit greedy, and probably 2 strikers as well. A couple of names have been kind of floated about. Nathan Fraser from Wolves, he was at our game against Fleetwood on Monday. Matt Taylor confirmed our interest in him. I don't think anything's done in regards of that yet. I believe he's going off out to Abu Dhabi with Wolves for a warm weather training camp, and then when he comes back, hopefully we'll be able to get that over the line. But other clubs are interested. There's a lad from Crystal Palace as well, another striker whose name escapes me, unfortunately.
We've been talking about this.
Ademola Oladipo, I think
that's it.
And the pronunciation could be wrong.
There's Nathan Fraser you're linked with as well, weren't you?
Yeah, so
yeah,
Fraser, as I mentioned, was at the game on
Oh,
Monday. And then, but yeah, the lad from Palace, again, that was released from within the London press that we were apparently leading kind of the hunt to get him in on loan.
You were the heavy sort of favourite, if you like, for him. I think Pompey also looked at him briefly.
Again, from what I believe, I think that was. I don't think we're quite as clear cut as that article made out. From what I'm led to believe, I think that might be a bit of agent talk. From what I hear, we are interested in him. But in terms of us being the front runners, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it might be a case of his agent has included our name in there to get a bit more interest in him, which you can't blame them for that. But it's another name that's been kicking about. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, that they're the positions really: 2 wing backs, centre mid, and a striker. We have brought in a lad from Ireland already, Roland Adowu, who I believe is a centre midfielder, kind of attacking midfielder. Again, I don't think anyone can expect him to come straight in to be a regular in League One at the minute. If he does, awesome. But if not, then there won't be too many questions being asked. I think he is one more that's being seen for the long term. But yeah, hopefully we can get a couple in early-ish just to bolster the numbers a little bit, if nothing else.
That would certainly help, wouldn't it? One player, talking of recruiting from Ireland, you signed Tamise Sobowale from the second tier of Ireland in the summer. Taking a bit of time to get going, but I think I'm right in saying he's moved into a wide forward role rather than playing at wing back recently, and actually impressed in that win over Fleetwood.
Yeah, he did. He started on the right of a front three. We switched to a 3-4-3 on Monday from where we'd usually play a 3-5-2. He was on the right hand side of a front three, and yeah, and he did well. He gave us a bit of pace, a bit of power. He's still very raw. That's clear to see, but it's that bit of unpredictability. It's almost as if he doesn't know what he's going to do, then defenders can't know what he's going to do either. But no, he did very well. Like I say, he gave us something that we've been missing for the first few months of the season, in that directness, that running with the ball. Got an assist for the third goal as well. Still areas to work on, clearly, as you'd be expected. But yeah, he was certainly something that we haven't seen so far. Like I say, he has had a few games at right wing back, and he's done okay. Really, he's probably looked a bit below League One standard in his appearances at right wing back. But I think when he was, like I say, given that bit more of an attacking license on Monday, he wasn't needing to worry about defending so much. Yeah, he did well. Fleetwood, that they are bottom of the league, so it does have to be taken with a slight pinch of salt and not get carried away. But the signs were certainly encouraging, and hopefully he can continue those performances up. Just I think, for his own benefit for one, but also because he made us look a better team in terms of what he gave us.
Do you think you're going to get sucked into a relegation dogfight then, Jack?
Performances would say yes. I know we've spoken about the fact we are 7 points clear, but no one's getting carried away with that. I don't believe anyone's got any kind of delusions of grandeur of trying to aim for the playoffs. The aim very much is survival. I would like to think the fact that if we can recruit well in January, excuse me, that will make our life a bit easier. I think if we don't recruit well, we will certainly get dragged back into that relegation dogfight. 30 points, 20 more points to get to 50. Was it 7 wins, 6 wins, and a couple of draws? You'd like to think we could be able to do that now. If we can't, then we've only got ourselves to blame from that. So, quietly optimistic that we shouldn't have too many major stresses. But equally, if we don't improve our performances, then we will drop back down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense. Jack, thanks so much for talking to us and bringing us your insight, and keep up the great work on Shrews Analysis.
Cool. Thanks for having me, guys, as always. Thank you.
Cheers, pal. Delighted to bring in our next guest, Dan Finch on Charlton. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. I'm just wondering, do you agree with Charlton being on the potential plummeters section? Because I suppose you're not really playoff candidates this season, a little bit out of form. Do you see any sort of fear in terms of a relegation dogfight, or do you feel like you're going to be able to arrest this recent slide?
I think realistically, we should be all right to get out of it once we get, fitness is key for us. The Chucks, Panucci, Kamara, Alfie May. There are bodies to come back into this team that will make a difference. But you can't rule it out. I think we play Port Vale on Saturday, and I think Exeter have Carlisle. So the loser, there's a fair chance, is 3 points off the relegation zone. So to rule it out, and the way we've been playing, I think it's 2 wins in 12. I think we haven't won for about 6 games now, so 6-7 games, and we keep conceding late goals. Burton did it, obviously did it again Saturday. 2 from Cambridge were late on, so unless we sort it out, magic happens. There's got to be a realistic opportunity.
I wasn't impressed with, sorry to rip salt in the wound, Dad. I wasn't impressed with the performance. Obviously, I'm an Oxford fan and I'm watching you recently. It wasn't the second half, but really, since you started really well, you started on the front foot. You looked like you were going to really take the game to Oxford, and then it sort of fizzled out, and then it never really came back. I thought the first sort of 10, 15 minutes, it was two quite nervous sides, two sides that weren't really sure what they were going to do. It's not the most analytical piece I've put together, but it was really nervous. You could tell these two teams weren't in great form. And then Oxford in the second half, I think we just got hold of the game, and you didn't get hold of it. But the first, I was there watching. I was thinking, I don't know who's going to sort of take this game to the opposition. You scored early, then we reacted fairly quickly. But you can the biggest concern I've got with Charlton is the identity, or the lack of identity. I know you've got injuries in there, and I know you've got players that you want to be there, and some big names that look. Kamara, for example, is a massive name. Somebody who we're really excited about to see back in League One. He hasn't been fit. Players like that, of course, are going to be a massive miss. But we're not quite seeing what Michael Appleton wants to do, and you then have to sort of start saying, right, when these players do get fit, do you trust him that he can build a style and build that identity that Charlton so desperately need? Against Oxford, it almost was like, right, we're going to sit back and defend, but we can't quite do that. We can hit on the break because we've got Blackett-Taylor and Campbell, but again, relying on them to be your only style and threat is slightly naive. I think when that identity is formed, you can start then building and use that recruitment strategy that I think actually is in place. You've got new owners that want to spend money. I think you will spend money. But until you nail on exactly what you want to do and how you want to approach it, I see Charlton sort of continuing in this sort of quite dark cycle. I'm not quite sure how you look at it, but I wasn't quite sure what Michael Appleton was attempting to do with that team.
Yeah, no, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And if you ask a lot of Charlton fans, that's the exact problem that we were asking those questions. What is the game plan? Because even without the injuries or with the injuries, you want to see a statement from the manager. He's probably been there now. I think Dean Holden was sacked after the 6th game, and how many games are into the campaign now? 5 games. So by now you should at least be seeing the groundwork to what he wants to do. I can't tell you what the groundwork is.
That's a really good point. You can have a lot of players not available, and you can lose games 3-0, but you can go, right, well, at least we're attempting that. The problem is you're losing 3-4 games of the bounce, and you're walking away from every game going, right, we've lost that game, and we still don't actually know what he's intending to do. Because you can add players like Leeburn, you can add players like Kamara, Alfie didn't play against Oxford. You can add him back into the mix. These are some very, very talented footballers. You can recruit in January. That's absolutely fine. You can bolster that team. But ultimately, you don't quite know when they are going to come back, and when they do come in, what sort of team they're going to be playing in. And the concern is at the moment, Michael Appleton, I'm not quite as sure either. So, yeah, I can see why it's really frustrating, and Charlton fans will be nervous about that going forward, because you are in a bit of a dark cycle.
Yeah, and obviously on Saturday, as you were saying, the Oxford game, there was a period of the last kind of 20, 25 minutes where I think everyone in the stadium knew at some point Oxford are going to be given a chance. And the way that Oxford have played over the season, fair chance they're going to take it. And it got to the point where I think there was Oxford's stats, possession stats was 70. And I was looking, thinking, is he going to at least try it? I understand that the bench isn't full of talent, maybe like in terms of experience, which is something that Appleton keeps saying. But surely you just gamble. You've lost 3 of the last 4. You keep conceding late goals. Surely you try something. And in the end, I think he made a sub. He brought on Terrell Thomas for Eden, and Watson came on, and you're just making like for like subs. It didn't make a difference. The goal is a pile driver, but could you do something different rather than what we've seen for the last 3 or 4 games that isn't working?
It was a mixture of being really reactive. I thought really reactive and not proactive, and also I think Michael Appleton. And again, I'm not a football manager. I'm sure there was more thinking behind it. But from looking at it from a purely external perspective, it looked as if he was like, we're going to just stay doing this and just hope that Oxford don't score. Like that was the game plan. It was like, we're going to just stay doing what we're doing. And if it finishes 1-1, we can just say that we defended really well, but we're just going to stick or twist. And in the end, you didn't stick or twist. You basically just carried on with the sort of the same repetitive game plan. That's why you lost the game, because you didn't change. You were very, very reactive. And actually, I don't know if you were reactive. I think you were just pretty neither proactive or reactive. And that's probably the story of the season. You've sort of just accepted what's come at you and haven't responded effectively. It looks a worrying place. Quite toxic as well, which is a bit of a concern.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of that, and probably what I would say feeds into it is, even though I think Michael Appleton's a really good coach, and I believe in
Yeah.
him as a developer of talent. And there's definitely been stories, there's definitely been times where in his first season at Oxford, fans were a little bit frustrated. In his first season at Lincoln, fans were a little bit frustrated, and then there came to a point where he got it right and brought a lot of success to both those clubs. So I do think that he's got that he can be a very good coach. At the same time, I think that what Michael Appleton probably misses in his skill set is probably the ability to really galvanise and connect with the fan base, because it's just not something that he puts much energy into doing. And that's probably one of the reasons why maybe at Lincoln he wasn't as popular as maybe Danny Cowley, his predecessor, despite actually taking them to a greater height in terms of a League One player final. And I think that's one thing at a well-run club like Lincoln and probably Oxford. But I think at a club like Charlton that's been through the mill, you kind of need to see a bit more passion, a bit more enthusiasm from the manager, and a bit more willingness to connect with supporters on top of some of those tactical things that you've mentioned, Dan.
Yeah, and after the game on Saturday, for instance, he went up to the north stand and cupped his ears like, what are you doing? That's not going to help the atmosphere. And then came into his press conference and said that the fans aren't doing their bit, without saying that in the exact words, but there was digs at the fan base. You're not going to get this to turn around if you're doing that. Like, he spent the last 2-3 weeks, I don't know how much either of you have paid any attention to like his press conferences. He's been coming out and singling players out in press conferences. It's all making it doesn't look good from the outside. I can't imagine from the inside it's pretty good. If that player, Louis Watson, seems to be the person at the minute that he's going after, a young lad who hasn't played much football. What are you expecting?
And also, what do you get out of that? Because he's on loan anyway, so he's going to go back. So that seems really bizarre. If you're going to try and galvanise a group by maybe going down the aggressive route, do it for a player that is at the football club permanently that you can maybe use to bounce off of. Doing it to Louis Watson's absolutely fine, because Louis Watson can just go to Luton or wherever he's on loan from and just go, that's fine, we'll just recall you straight away. That was bizarre. And also, speaking to quite a few Charlton fans, Louis Watson as a footballer has is impressed when he's come on, and he's not getting any game time. Sort of really weird decisions that he's making, both on a sort of a verbal level and a tactical level, are really, really quite bizarre, really weird.
Yeah, and he's persisting with the same starting 11, and I get it. He doesn't want to rely on youth too much, but players like Scott Fraser, who come back from his kind of longer spell injury out, hasn't come back the player he was. He looks out on his feet after 10-15 minutes, and he has not looked good, but he's persistently picking him over someone like Louis Watson. And then he'll come out and say Louis Watson's not up to scratch, but he's only played 5-10 minutes. And normally, as you said, we're chasing the game or we're trying to defend for our lives, like he came on at Oxford. So he's not actually getting time to just go out there and express himself. The player we got from Louis Watson when he started at the club and the Louis Watson that comes on the pitch now, they're completely different people, because he's lost everything.
Confidence is massive, isn't it? And I think it looks like Michael Appleton, and that's probably a summary of his time. Michael Appleton has ruined the confidence of a lot of these players, and actually what he needed to do was come in and build that and galvanise, and he hasn't done that.
And I think, I was just going to say also, I think the other thing for Michael Appleton, where you might be able to support him a little bit, is I don't think the majority of Charlton fans wanted Dean Holden to be sacked. So when Holden was then let go, and then there was a debate about who our manager was going to be. There was a lot of talk about Lee Bowyer coming back. I think some of the fans were really keen to get him back. There was talks of the Cowley brothers. Michael Appleton was low down on the fans' list, and then it was given to Michael Appleton, and the reaction was lukewarm at best. And we haven't looked any different from we did under Dean Holden. In fact, now we look worse.
Yeah, I think Dean Holden was treated really badly, because it was actually quite encouraging performances early on, didn't quite get the results, few decisions went against you, a lot of injuries, quite an imbalanced squad, having to rely on youngsters a lot in terms of that first 11. So to sack him 5 games in after a bit of a turnaround last season, I think was very harsh. I did want to ask you, Dan, before we bring in our next guest, Scott, who's a Port Vale fan, and Freddie, who's Cambridge United, a couple of questions. Just to sort of quick fire. What are Charlton going to need in January, do you think, Dan?
A bit of everything. I think first and foremost, someone in the midfield to bring energy. just to get box to box. Said Scott Fraser's legs seem to have gone, so we need to replace that. And I think the second one, the must, is a winger opposite Blackett Taylor, because I think Tyrese Campbell isn't quite ready yet, and Alfie May's been playing on the wing a lot, and I prefer him up.
Yeah, I think a few people have been saying that he's much better in a central role. Yeah. I also wanted to ask Dan, do you think you're going to get dragged into a relegation battle in the second half of the season?
I think we'll do enough. It's very Charlton athletic over the last couple of years to kind of get ourselves away enough. I think we're on rinse and repeat for about the third season in a row. We'll do enough to keep ourselves clear. We'll finish in 14th. We'll be told we'll do it again next season. The transfer window is going to be big. We need to make sure that we've got players to make the fight. As I said, this Saturday is going to be a big one. We need to beat Port Vale.
Yeah, that feels like a big game.
Absolutely. Dan, thanks so much for your time, and all the best for the rest of the season.
Cheers, lads.
Cheers. Jack, I know you've got to shoot it in a moment too. Just before I let you go, can I push you for a predicted bottom four?
I thought I could sneak off. I thought I could
think you can get away with this, Jack.
I think Fleetwood are down. I think Carlisle could get relegated. I'll go Exeter.
Okay.
And I just believe in Daryl Clark. So I think Cheltenham stay up. But if they stay up, do I see Reading go down? Oh, why did you do this?
Like Reading were the team we were most sure about going down last time we did this.
And I'm not sure now. I'm really not sure now. Would you say? Sorry. I'm actually going to help you.
Go for it. Yeah.
Would you say that? But are you still putting Burton in that mix? Because I think Cambridge are fine. I think we're going to find.
Oh yeah, Burton. I think it all hangs on who they appoint. I like the impact Gary Mills has made, but I still would probably lie on the side that they probably need an experienced DFL manager. I'm not sure Gary Mills is going to do it for a whole season. I could be completely wrong on that, but that's probably what I would say. So, yeah.
My safe prediction would actually be, and it's really boring, I actually would go with the current bottom four. My ballsy prediction would swap Cheltenham and Burton.
You think you'd go with Cheltenham going down right now then, as your safe prediction?
It's my safer one, yeah, because I just think Burton have got a better... Burton, their squad itself is actually quite good. They just haven't really utilised it, and the managerial situation has not helped whatsoever, of course, with them not really having that stability, whereas Cheltenham now seem to have got that stability. But then at the same time, we had this chat when the Carlisle fan came on, and he was speaking about how the fact that they are going to have money to spend in January. If they spend that right, then Carlisle then have to be in there.
Oh yeah, Carlisle are going to make signings this January where you think, oh.
So it comes down to if they click, I think they're fine. Same with Exeter, really. They've already started strong with a signing today from Fulham. That lad from Fulham looks really exciting. So yeah, let's be.
There's a lot to unpack in a couple of minutes, isn't it?
It is. Let's go with Burton falling in there, and I'll leave as soon as Ed comes in. And I'm going to say that Cheltenham stay up.
Okay, don't forget, Burton fans, you can tweet Jack at Jack.
Yeah. I'll just delete the app now. Perfect.
Yeah, thanks for your time, mate. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, guys. Take care, guys. Thank you very much.
Take care, Brad. Brad. Yeah. Anyway. Right, I'm delighted to be joined by Scott from Picardy Breezer on Twitter, Port Vale fan. Scott, just wondering how you're feeling about Port Vale's survival chances, because there was a moment where fans were feeling a little bit apprehensive, but last few weeks you seem to have, dare I say, turned a corner.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think there was that run from mid-September to sort of mid-December, which really had a few fans concerned. We were kind of getting sucked in. I think we were only 3 points off at one point in time. And then we've mustered like kind of 3 or 4 wins and a couple of draws to kind of pull ourselves out of it. There've been some bad losses within that mix as well, as you can expect from a side like us. But I think everyone's feeling a little bit more bullish about our survival chances. But a lot's going to hang on what we do this month, because other teams around us and in that bottom four are going to strengthen. I mean, you mentioned Carlisle already on the show. They've got money to spend this month. You just know Daryl Clark's going to have some kind of armoury and war chest at Cheltenham. Might not be the biggest, but he's going to spend that as wisely as he can and get them playing his way. So there's going to be improvements in the sides below us, and it's just a case of whether we actually make a success of this transfer window, because we all saw what happened last year. We went what seemed quite a secure position, got January horribly wrong, and then ended up finishing lower mid-table. So something similar this time around could prove incredibly costly indeed.
Certainly could, Scott. I wanted to ask you about Andy Crosby, because I feel like the sort of the rhetoric around him kind of changes depending on the popularity of the narrative at the time, because there's a school of thought that says Andy Crosby got Port Vale promoted last season because of the situation with Darrell Clarke, and there's another school of thought which says no, Darrell Clarke had to come back sort of ahead of schedule because he was the one who got the team up in the end. And I sort of feel like it's actually not an awful lot of points sort of dissecting those two things, because I don't really believe that it's either it was all Darrell Clarke and Andy Crosby was the face of it, or it was all Andy Crosby and Darrell Clarke were just the face of it. I feel like those are just interchangeable narratives that don't really do anything. But I suppose I wanted to ask you where you are on Andy Crosby, and is he the right person to take this football club forward?
Yeah, I think the jury's still out on that one, Gate, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. So what Andy Crosby seems to be embarking on at Port Vale is a journey of completely overhauling the style of play at the football club. He's trying to sort of implement this very much play out from the back, possession-based style of football. And I think at the moment, because we're in that transitional phase, we're finding that whilst we can play some really, really good football at times, we're found wanting in key areas where we don't have the players good enough to certainly play out from the back. So people like Nathan Smith have been singled out. Obviously, been a very reliable performer for the club over a number of years in League Two and also to an extent League One. But like technically, he's not the best of centre halves, and he has been found wanting at times this season. So that's just one example. And then to actually make this sort of system work that we're trying to play, it appears that you need kind of almost a false nine striker who's going to drop in, link play, sort of run into channels, and also get on the end of things, is mobile enough to get on the end of things to make that work. And again, when the likes of James Wilson aren't fit, we kind of lack those options in the final third to really make everything tick. So I think there's something good there in the making, but it's just lacking one or two things in key areas. And I think that's another reason why this upcoming transfer window is going to be so important for us.
Absolutely. And I suppose I've looked at Port Vale's squad in the first half of the season, where the midfield, especially when you did have Ollie Arblaster on loan from Sheffield United, was such an overwhelmingly strong area of this squad. And you had probably one of the best shot stoppers in the league as well in Connor Ripley. But without, when Alex Iacovitti was injured, for example, on the left side defence, there are issues in defence. Maybe I suppose you could ask questions at wing back and then up top. So it was felt like a bit of a top heavy squad. So you've got to replace Arblaster, or do your best to get as close to that in January. Whilst also, I imagine there's quite a few areas for Andy Crosby and David Flitcroft to try and address.
Yeah, for sure. So replacing Ollie Arblaster is the obvious one. That's a priority, especially with Funzo Ojo out injured. We don't know how long for, but obviously we're lacking sort of deep line playmakers now. So we certainly need one of those to come in January to at least sort of vacate, to sort of fill that gap that's been vacated by Arblaster going back to the Blades. But other than that, we're finding that with Mitch Clark on the treatment table long term, Tom Sang out injured as well, we're actually quite stretched in terms of our wing back options. And we've seen the last couple of games, two sort of players from the academy have featured there, and Ben Lomax and Jack Shorrock both did really, really well against Blackpool. But then we're found wanting a little bit in the Carlisle game. We probably needed a little bit more experience there. So we definitely need, I think, a left-sided option at wing back to just give us a little bit more depth, at least until Clark comes back.
Have you still got Conor Grant? Is he injured or?
Yeah, so he's recently returned to fitness, and he's only played, I think he played 45 minutes in the Carlisle game recently, and then maybe played. Yeah, I don't think he's played a full game since coming back from injury, because Crosby's very much like sort of COVID Boris Johnson. He's very much guided by the sports science, so. He's always making sure that, say, a player's at risk of breaking down. I mean, he will withdraw that player as and when he needs to, no matter sort of where you are in the game. And that's been a little bit costly for us because we've had to withdraw sort of experienced players that have needed to come off to avoid injury. And we've kind of been left kind of hanging on at the end as a result of that, because of that sort of lack of depth that we've got at the moment. And that's down to one or two things. I mean, it's down to sort of a little bit of a thin squad to begin with, but also quite kind of a lengthy injury list at the same time. So when we're finding ourselves sort of ahead in games and having to throw academy players on to try and see results out, it is costing us a little bit. And obviously there's sections of the fan base that will put that down to game management. certainly from the manager's point of view, but others will kind of see sympathy with the manager's circumstances there and think, well, actually, are his hands tied in terms of the options that he can turn to in a game? So, like, there's a lot of criticism on Crosby's shoulders, but also there's a little bit of an understanding that, you know, there are circumstances that are going against him in terms of injuries, in terms of squad depth, and we obviously need to address that this month, and maybe he deserves a chance on the back of that.
We're looking at 6 or 7 additions, Scott, do you think?
In an ideal world, I'd say that many, Gabe, but I think realistically we're probably looking at about 4. I'd expect.
Oh, really? Only 4?
Yeah, I'd expect 2 or 3 to be out. The likes of sort of Lewis Cass and Tom Conlon, who are out of favour, I think will probably be departing the club this window. I can't see Josh Thomas sort of lasting beyond January either. I think he'll be his loan will be cut short and he'll be sent back to Swansea, and that will make room for another striker. But I'd expect at the bare minimum a centre half, a left wing back, a centre midfielder to replace Arblaster, and then another striker. But ideally, we get a touch more in other areas as well.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. If it is those 4 additions, then do you think that'll be enough to keep your heads just above water?
Yeah, I think it'll be enough to see us just do enough, providing that they will play the majority of the remaining games, because we don't want to be bringing in players that are going to break down straight away. I mean, the treatment table's occupied enough as it is, and we are going to eventually get those players back to fitness, and that's going to make a huge difference. So I think these guys just need to add a little bit of depth into the equation, just until we can get some of those bodies back. But we don't want essentially a load of players that are maybe on their first loan or something like that coming in that are inexperienced. So we are going to need players that are going to come in and improve the squad. And that's what we kind of failed to get right last January. I mean, we brought in sort of Aaron Donnelly, who was on his first time loan from Nottingham Forest, didn't fill the void left by Connor Hall, and that was seen as a massive failure in that transfer window. So we can't afford to get signings in key areas like that wrong again. So I think a lot of it's going to hinge on what we do this month. But if we can get our business right, I think we'll probably do just about enough to finish roughly where we are now.
Well, let's hope that's the case. Scott, thanks for talking to us, and hopefully catch you later in the season.
Yeah, cheers, Gabe. Really appreciate it as always.
Top man. Cheers, Scott. Delighted to introduce our next guest, Freddie Owers, from the Under the Abbey Stand podcast on Cambridge United, and Adam Parks from the Lowdown podcast of Leyton Orient, who kindly stepped in for the last 20 minutes or so as co-host. Good evening, gents. Thanks for joining us. Freddie, I'm just wondering, I suppose that the mood at Cambridge at the moment is there's been a real turnaround under Neil Harris and a lot of optimism that's come from that. But maybe the last couple of games have reminded you of what this squad needs going into January.
Yeah, I mean, you could chalk it down to the famous new manager bounce that people always talk about. But I'd be inclined to cut Neil Harris a bit of slack, because the squad was a bit depleted, key players like Kachunga and Ahadme being out. If anything, it might be what we needed a bit for Harris to know what we need in January. Some pretty damning comments about players like Kimani Gordon. So it could be a bit of a kick up the backside for him to work his magic in January, which is something that I think we're all keen to see as a fan base.
I mean, strikers going to be the top priority, do you think, Freddie? Yeah,
definitely. A few names being chucked about, quite ambitious names like Lee Gregory, which obviously would be a lot of money to chuck at somebody for what you'd expect to be a short-term contract. But in previous transfer windows, we've sort of known what to expect with Mark Bonner, quite a similar transfer strategy. So it's hard to call what's going to happen in January for us under a new manager. And I haven't done extensive research into what Harris likes to do in transfer windows, but yeah, I'm sure he has a plan. He said a lot about how important the window is for him, and I'm sure we're going to come out of the January transfer window with necessary departures and necessary signings, whether they be loans or short-term deals, because I doubt we have the financial capacity to bring in players on long-term contracts now, especially first teamers. But I think we all have faith that Harris is going to do good to the team and the squad throughout January.
Yeah, I think Harris tends to like his experienced heads who tend to be pretty strong characters as well. And Parksy, I think did you beat Cambridge 2-0 early in the season around September time?
No, we beat them 1-0. 1-0.
Beat them 1-0. what did you make of them back then in terms of where they are in League One?
Well, if you look at the form table right now, and back then, it was kind of the same. It's very fine margins, isn't it? I mean, you could probably put a few parallels with Leyton Orient and Cambridge being quite toothless in terms of, goal scoring. So, they were a decent team back in the early parts of the season, and I don't think they were that great on New Year's Day. But Neil Harris, I think, should have had more time at Gillingham. He definitely should have had more time at Gillingham. And I think they know that now. I think he's a good manager to have, and I think Cambridge will be okay this year. But I think there's a lot of teams that need a transfer window. Cambridge is definitely one of them.
I mean, Freddie, other than strikers, what do you think is going to be key? Because the one thing that sort of really stands out to me is that you've got Liam Bennett, who had really good form in the second half of last season and in the first half of it on loan at Walsall, playing as a right wing back. And this season he's been playing right back in a back four, and there's probably been the question mark over whether playing in a back four suits him as much. I don't know if you have a take on that.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think he's a quality player and someone that I hope we hang on to for as long as possible. He has been definitely overused this season due to a lack of depth and perhaps in a role that he's not as familiar with as he is when he has a bit more freedom to go and do what he wants to do out wide. And you could say that we have players that could fill in, like Triple-Ocadina, who can and have been out on the right, but I think we can't really rely on versatile players filling in. We want to have as healthy a squad as possible, and I'd rather have backup in that position as someone that's a bit more natural. At the back, it is definitely, apart from strikers, defenders are what we need the most. And I saw names being thrown around about midfielders that we could bring in. I'd be very hesitant to put any money towards a midfielder before we can do so a striker or a defender. I think players like Danny Andrew on the other side have been hot and cold. Obviously, a player that can do it and has done it at times, but has also been very, very poor for us at times as well. So I think our first couple of additions should be at the back, especially in the wider areas, because we're very depleted, especially with Harrison Dunk being out. I think he's on his way back, but still 2 options at left back and 1 option at right back is not what we need if we want to stay away from the relegation zone.
Absolutely. Do you think you will stay away from the relegation zone if you get the right additions then, Freddie?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, you can draw a lot of parallels between this season and last season as to how it's gone. I think that we've had the wake-up call and acted upon it early enough this season, and we've had a few good results. I take the last couple with a bit of a pinch of salt. We should probably have got the result at home to Orient from a Cambridge perspective, and Oxford away, they nicked it right at the end. I'd go as far as saying being proud of the performance, despite maybe some tactical things that we could have got right in the third quarter of that game. Blackpool result was great, and winning games at home to Exeter. I think that with the additions, we can start to keep winning the games that we expect to win and make it hard for teams that expect to beat us. So, yeah, I do think that we'll be fine, especially if we have a good window.
Yeah, well, let's hope that's the case. Freddie, thanks so much for talking to us, and all the best for the rest of the season, mate.
Thanks, Gab. Pleasure.
Cheers. Parks, I wanted to talk to you about Leyton Orient because I was there for that 2-1 victory at Cheltenham, which I thought was very fortuitous, I must say, and I think Richie Wellens felt that way as well. But it does seem to have prompted a bit of a turnaround for Leyton Orient. Was that the little slice of fortune that you maybe needed to get your form going again, albeit you weren't in an awful position, I must stress, going into that game?
Well, I wouldn't say we were in an awful position, but we were definitely going through a little bit of a funk. We had to play some really good teams, Oxford being one of those as well, and we had to replay the Lincoln game, which I know we've spoken about on a WhatsApp group about that. But the Charlton game, and I've already said it tonight about fine margins. We were losing that game. It didn't look like anything was going to happen until the last 5 minutes, and we scored 2 goals. We win the game. You need that bit of luck. The 3 games over Christmas, Charlton, it goes back to what I say all the time. I don't think League One's as good a level as it was last year. There's quite a lot of teams on the same level, so it could be a few surprises in the playoffs and maybe a few surprises in the relegation zone as well later in the season. But we've got 3 clean sheets. We're quite solid. If you look at the goals that we've conceded this year, we've had some games we've lost, let in 3 or 4. So our defence is pretty much consistently good. I disagree a little bit with Freddie about the game on Monday. I think I agree with what he said about tactically being a naive potentially for Cambridge. I think the Orient really did well with their midfield because there was so much space in front of their back 4. We hit the woodwork 3 times. I mean, I don't know how lucky you want to be and how even a game that makes it, but we've definitely been on the end of some of those games, and Cheltenham being one of them would have been a game that they would have felt hard done by. But yes, it was definitely needed. And I think that Dan Ajayi coming back into the fold and getting fitter gives us options, which we lost with Jordan Graham going. And now we have the January transfer window that we're in, and we're eagerly awaiting to see what we're going to pull out of the bag. But we'll see.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, I feel like whenever I watch Leyton Orient, Parksy, you probably know what's coming here. I always feel like you're missing a progressive 6. And yet if I was to ask you who two of your best players are this season, you'd probably tell me it's Jordan Brown and Idris El Mazouni. So I guess it's a bit of a quandary. But do you think where are you on the midfield situation?
I would disagree. From a personal, I am a big. I mean, I purposely put these guys up here for fun. Lawrence from last year and Jordan for this year. We know we've had many a conversation about these players. I think Idris has had a bit of a slump, being honest. But he played well over Christmas. I mean, we should have beaten Wycombe. They were awful, Wycombe. To be in the most boring game and draw that 0-0 was, didn't have a shot on target, Wycombe. I would probably say that Theo Archibald has risen to the top this season, if you're going to push me on it. So I think Theo's definitely stepped up. He's been driven. He's tenacious. I've said it before. He's got that drive, that arrogance. Sometimes that lack of being able to shut up. Gets a cheap booking every now and again. And Omar Beckles as well. He was in and out of decency against Wycombe, but he's come back into the team after an injury and he's solidified the back. So I think Richie made a few changes to the system as well. I think we're starting to realise that no Richie Whelan's side, with very few exceptions, has a goal scorer that scores 25 goals in a season because of the system we play.
Of course.
But saying that, I do think we've spurned a lot of chances, and I mean a lot of chances. Raul Sotirio is our top scorer with 7, but I think it was the Cheltenham game where he was 1-on-1 and it was the Galbraith shot that went in. Am I right? I think that was the one. And he was 1-on-1 with the keeper, and it was, the keeper committed early and he could have side-footed it to the right-hand side of him. Maybe I'm being harsh, but there's a lot of times when we miss these easy opportunities. It's just not on Raul Sotirio, by the way. There's a few that have missed some glorious opportunities to get points on the ball. We could be in a much different position to where we are, and I'm not moaning about being where we are. But if you were going to push me on where I think we probably need a fullback, I think that Tom James and Rob Hunt are great, but Rob Hunt's got injured again, so I think we can't keep playing people like Ethan Galbraith and Jordan Brown in a fullback position when we need them elsewhere. Yes, I agree.
Galbraith make a difference to your midfield then, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, the guy's obviously got something, I go back to youth. Sometimes you have a player that's 20 years old who goes into a team and makes a world of difference. A 17-year-old like Bellingham comes in and he's world-class straight away. But Galbraith was at Man United. He was well thought of. Championship clubs wanted him. We've got him. He's going to be inconsistent because he's going to find his feet. He was in and out of the team, and now he's getting a bit of a run. Let's see what happens with the lad. I think he's got creativity. He can play in certain areas. I just don't want him to be another Jordan Brown. I just want him to kind of go, right, I'm going to sit in front of you guys and I'm going to play the ball around and be that guy that plays the through balls, that scores goals from 20 yards, or is the kind of number 8 running into the box, which I think goal scoring midfielders is something we've not had for a long, long time. And we probably need someone out wide, because I know that Dan Ajayi can play out wide, but we need a bit of a fluid front three, I think. And I think if we can get another player to bolster that, and there's always rumours that we're after this guy from here or that guy from there, and until it happens, I won't say anything else. But I think there's a few people that maybe moved on.
Upset here and there, fans, do we?
Well, it's just, are we getting this guy from Tottenham? We're getting this guy from there, and it's just like, really, Colchester have let the guy go back to there, and he's going to come to us, and it's you don't know, do you? And it's got to that. I think I've got old enough now to where I actually I'm not bothered until it happens. It's nice to know things sometimes, but we do need a strike. I think one in each part of the pitch is what we need. And I think we're good. I mean, I said before, I think we're better than what we are. And it's not me saying that I think we're in a false position and we shouldn't be lower. I don't think so. I think the standard of League One isn't great. And I think we've had opportunities to get more points than we have. And we can't change the Lincoln results. I'm not going to keep going on about it, but if you swap that over, then suddenly we're a bit higher up. And
yeah, I've seen you at Northampton and at Cheltenham, and I've not been massively enamoured with it. I appreciate that's a really small sample.
No, but I can get from an objective point of view that I watch the debate every week, and I sometimes listen to some of the fans who have just played the Orient talk. And you're like, well, I didn't see that game. And it's not just rose-tinted glasses or red-tinted glasses, if you want to say that. I think there's a process that we have to go through being a new team in this division. That if we want to get to the Championship, we want 2 or 3 years progression. But it doesn't stop the frustration or potential frustration of some fans that have had instant success, essentially, for the last 6 years, because we've won 2 league titles. We've gone up the leagues. We haven't had a cup run, but these guys that are now 18 that have followed Orient since they were coming into their teenage years, they expect stuff. So the demand is there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in terms of that, I feel that I am judging Orient on a first year in a new division, but I'm also judging the rest of the teams of being relegated teams from the Championship, teams that have come up, and teams that have been in League One quite solidly for the years. And I honestly don't think it's that good. And if you look at the form table, there's not a lot split in the top 14. And if if we'd have lost to Cambridge on Monday, they'd be in our position in the form table, and we'd be further down. So it is literally a case of just stringing together some results, and it can get you anywhere. So you asked a question in the WhatsApp group last week, or the other day, who would be your 6 to 8 teams that would go down? And I said, well, I think the 8 teams that are there, Burton to get out, and maybe Charlton would get dragged in. I mean, how many people are going to say Charlton would get dragged in? That's how bad I think the league is. I had Charlton to be up there at the beginning of the season. I think a lot of people did. They've been absolutely abysmal.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really interesting point, and I think Orient have settled in really nicely. I do want to sort of ask you about that dynamic in terms of sort of getting the goals, because you've mentioned that Dan Ajayi's made a real difference coming back, right? And you've mentioned that Theo Archibald, and I've been really impressed, by the way, with Archibald as well. I think he's quick, he's direct, and I love those things that you've mentioned about him in terms of that attitude. At the same time, if Ajayi's not necessarily going to get you to rack up the goals, Archibald's probably not a goal-scoring winger, I wouldn't say. I think he's more of a conventional winger. That's probably more how I would see him, unless you want to argue with that.
I don't disagree with you. I think it's the way that we play. I mean, he hits a great shot. He hit a crossbar on Monday. He could score more. I mean, if he's playing on the left, then that back post. I mean, we don't cross the ball as much as we probably should, because we don't have the striker in there to potentially hit. That's not the system we play. We drag teams around the park when we're attacking them, and we bring them out and we look for runners. He would be a perfect player for a team that is crossing the ball from the right hand side and he comes in at the back post. He would be the perfect player for it, because he's got the engine for it.
Yeah.
But we don't tend to do that. Now, if that might change, you don't know what we're going to get in January. We don't know. Dan Ajayi's not fit yet, but he's making an impact. So if he gets up to speed pretty quickly, which it seems like he's doing, who knows how that's going to work. And the dynamic of the front 3-4, because obviously the guy playing in the 8 will maybe Galbraith, maybe. I don't think Moncur will be at the club much longer. That's not anything I've heard. It just feels that way, when a player's had their moment.
Sure.
So
I also think George Moncur likes being a big fish in a small pond, where you sort of build the team around him, in that sort of way, where if you step up the leagues, it's going to be harder to play the games on your terms. And actually, you probably need someone who can do a bit more against the ball, possibly.
Yeah, but George Moncur is no longer a big fish in a small pond.
No, that's my point.
That's exactly your point. I get it. He need, I guess that if you want to evolve a team that is, especially when you go up a level, you need a team that all 11 players are buying into an ethic, a workload, someone who's always going to track back. He loses the ball, he wants it back. And George Moncur, the ball sticks at his feet the majority of the time, so he doesn't lose it. But when he does, and his position sometimes is questionable, he hasn't got the engine to get back and help out the other midfielders or the defence. And so when you look at a player like Ethan Galbraith, Jordan Brown, Idris El-Mazouni, they're players that lose the ball, but they track back, or if someone loses the ball, they're in there, they're fighting for it, they're trying to cut the runs off, making those cynical fouls and getting bookings for. George Moncur isn't part of that, and I love George Moncur. I think he's a brilliant footballer, and sometimes at his best, he was so brilliant to watch, and he was a big part of last year. But I just feel that we probably need more dynamism. And, I would take 15% off of George Moncur if we could have George Moncur with an engine. But that's not going to happen.
Well,
not his
I
age.
actually think this squad lends itself to a bit of a 4-3-3, and I know I'm going to keep banging this drum, but it's literally every time I've watched Leyton Orient, I've felt this, that maybe Idris El-Mazouni could add goals to his game if you give him that freedom to push on that little bit more, because you've got Jordan Brown being your anchor. You've got a playmaker that can switch the play a little bit like what Northampton have had with Mark Leonard, someone who can ping a pass to the diagonals and really get play moving. I see Jordan Brown being a bit more, bring the work rate, break things up, and then play the simple passes. But I think that's, if you want to play the style that Richie Wellen seems to like at this level, I think a more of a playmaker type, and then you've got your El-Mazouni possibly actually chipping in with a few more goals. So for me, I think the squad lends itself more towards a 4-3-3 than maybe the 4-2-3-1.
I agree with you, but I'd swap two players around in what you're saying, and that's Brown and Mazouni. Because El-Mazouni is not a natural goal scorer, or he hasn't. When he shoots, it goes some other places. Jordan Brown's got goal scoring in him. Ooh, and he's got a great shot on him. And to be fair, I think he's also got a little bit more nous. I think Mazouni's he's a good footballer, and he's a great tackler. He's very physical, but I see Jordan Brown in the role that you're saying for Mazouni, and I honestly think that would work. So I do agree with you, 4-3-3, which is essentially what we've started to play,
right?
Because with Archibald and Ajayi or Fall playing out right, you've got it. When we've not got the ball, we're a 4-5-1.
Yeah,
and when we have got the ball, we're pushing on with the three. So I agree with you 100%. I just think those two players swap and we're golden. But I do think we need one in each section of the pitch, and I think I'd be happy with 2 or 3, and maybe 2 or 3 go out. That's where I'm at.
Talking of happy, his partnership with Omar Beckles has been rekindled. How much of a difference do you reckon that's made to your form?
This is the time to pray for Dan Happy, because it tends to be around the turn of the year that he gets injured. Now, touching some wood.
You're this superstitious, Paxi.
I'm not, but like Dan Happy, he takes 5 steps forwards and then suddenly it's wallop. He's got a cruciate or a hamstring or something, And this happened last year. He was having such a great season in League Two, and we went to Northampton, and all the wheels fell off. We had 2 injuries, and I think Beckles got sent off in that game. We lost 3 centre backs in one game. But Dan Happy, honestly, I feel like if he had pace, he wouldn't be playing for us. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying he's slow, but if he had pace, he would probably be playing in the Championship. Do you know what I mean? I think there's players that that achieve a lot higher up in the league because they have pace. It's not necessary if they're a better defender, but because they have pace, they can make those challenges when mistakes happen. So yeah, Dan Happy has been excellent pretty much all season, and I really hope he doesn't get injured because he doesn't deserve it. It's his last year on his contract, and hopefully he does extend it, regardless of what division we're in. But we're not going to start talking Championship because I'm not that silly. But no, Dan Happy is an excellent footballer, and I really hope that he gets the plaudits that are coming his way because Beckles is a bit more flary and a bit more driving on the ball and stuff. It comes across that way.
Because initially he wasn't necessarily a flair defender, and then he played under David Artell at Crewe, and when they finished in the top half of League One, and from there he's added that side to his game, and he's become that sort of defender that you've talked about. But they complement each other so well, don't they? I want to ask you, Paxi, about the direction of Leyton Orient, because I think for Orient to take that next step and to start looking towards becoming, maybe a Championship ready side over the next 3, 4, 5 years, probably will need a little bit of capital coming into the club, and you'd probably hope that Richie Wellens, who I think does have the potential to take you to those places as a manager, can stick around as well. Where are we on that sort of path, do you think?
I think we're on a few steps higher than maybe some people think we are.
Right.
Our owners are very transparent, but I also think that they're going to keep a few things under their car bonnet. They want to show everyone what they're going to do. But if you look at some of the salary reports that are out there, we're some sides 8 million, 10 million away from what they're paying their players at the moment. So we do need more money to get those 1 or 2 players that may make a difference. Richie's got a squad of players that work for Richie. So we may need the 1 or 2 players that are that next level of quality to come in and complete this. But I think that 100% they need some more money. I think they'll get it from somewhere. I mean, they keep bringing.
Sorry, I think your volume's gone a little bit there, Paxi. I don't know if you can.
I think I had a WhatsApp call coming in. Can you hear me now? Sorry about it. It's quiz night at the pub, so wait for me to start it. But yes, I think that that Richie, if he stays, it will be because he wants to stay as it feels like home. And I think that the longer it goes with Richie, the better it is for us. And there's been some big jobs that have come up in the last 6 months up north. He may have alluded to have maybe been inquired about before as well. But once you get into Leyton Orient, you realise what community that club breeds, and they don't care who you are. If you're the manager of the team, you are one of the Orient. It doesn't matter. You come into the supporters club and you talk to them. If you're aloof, you won't get the buy-in. And the first thing Richie did was he made a point of speaking to podcasts, of speaking openly to the fans, where Kenny Jackett just said, no, we're not talking to no one.
Yeah.
Now we understand Justin Enbury used to do it, rest in peace, because he just didn't want to do anything. Like Joby McAnuff never wanted to talk to any of the podcasts or anything. But Richie Wellens, if he stays, is the biggest key part of it. I mean, you can't just replicate success like that by just getting someone else in with a name. Wayne Rooney and John, what was happening at Birmingham was they were doing really well, and then we've got to have a name in there. We'll get a name in, and look what's happened. So Richie Wellens has built something. He's built foundations to get us up to League Two at the end of the season prior. And then we've won League Two, and now he's doing it again. He's just building slowly, and the fans have just got to be patient. And if they're patient, because they can be quite fickle sometimes, we'll go on a little run now, and it'll be Richie's the best in the world, and then we'll lose 4 games, and then it'll be Wellens out. It's technically out. Thought no, we're in a different league. Let's just be patient. And I think Orient are in a good spot. Is a short answer to what your question was. I think we'll get there eventually.
Absolutely. Incidentally, where's the pub people can go to for a pub quiz night on Wednesdays?
Yeah, the Fowler's Farm in Braintree. I'll be leaving here at the end of the month. I'm moving up to Yorkshire in the Peak District. Yes. So when I have a quiz night there, I'll start promoting it on here. But no, yeah, quiz night tonight at the Fowler's Farm in Braintree. We're just about to start it once I've dropped off this, and but it's, I knew I'd finish, so I couldn't say no to you. So I just thought I'd jump on when I could.
Top man, Paxi. Go and enjoy your quiz night, and yeah, thanks for joining us and giving us your insight on the O's.
See you later, Gab.
Cheers.